are listening to Despair by Michael Brockbank. Episode 19. The two men walked into the heart of town without so much as a second glance tossed their way. It was one of the few privileges of taking a fresh body as opposed to a stored corpse. Magarius didn't have to worry about scaring townsfolk into taking rash actions against him. As for Darius, he was perfectly in his right to walk around as a normal man. Although his natural size often intimidated most, his true nature of being a lycanthrope was well hidden. Wellshire was bustling with life as people carried on throughout their normal routines. Shops were busy, the sound of children's laughter echoed from afar, and the smell of freshly baked goods wafted in the air. That was perhaps one of the things Magarius missed most about being mortal. As a lich, he had no need of food nor drink, and as he remembered, there were plenty of both that he quite enjoyed. As the two made their way along the main road towards the docks, Magarius saw a familiar face. A short, portly man stood under the shade of an awning in front of a tavern, regaling a group of men with a tale. It seemed Myron was able to get along just fine without his friend Bernard. Although the lich missed the beginning of the story, it was the ending that piqued his interest.
"Well, that's what I told my employer. Pay up or I'll slit your throat,"
Myron said in a grumbled voice towards the handful of men gripped by his tail.
"Then what you do?"
asked a younger man sitting on a nearby barrel.
"I didn't have to do anything. He paid up and I left. He knew I would follow up with my threat, so he had the good sense to give me the gold,"
Myron replied, placing a hand on the pommel of a knife at his hip.
"My friend figured he would stay behind, probably to beg a few more coins off him."
"That's not exactly how I remembered it, Myron," Magarius spoke up from behind the short man. Myron's face drained of color as he recognized the voice. If he had been drinking much more, he surely would have soaked his trousers. He turned to face the voice as the hairs along his neck and back stood on end.
"How are you doing, Bernard?"
Myron asked, visibly shaking at the visage before him. He knew that his employer could take over the dead, and since the massive bulk of a man stood next to Bernard's frame, Myron deduced the process had been complete. "Good. Though, I would like to have a conversation with you, if you're not busy," Magarius replied. Myron didn't dare deny the request. Even though his employer asked in a casual tone, he knew that refusal would be his undoing.
"I'll meet up with you later,"
Myron called back to the small gathering of men. The group slowly scattered, some walking back into the tavern. "I take it the ship is docking soon."
Yes, my lord."
Myron was visibly shaking. The man he knew most of his life stood before him, but with someone else's voice coming from his lips. Myron's heart pounded, and every bit of his soul screamed for him to run. "Come, let's make arrangements to have the wood shipped out of town." The plan was to have Myron bring the shipment of wood to the cliff where he would unload the lot. Then, Magarius would decide if the ruffian's usefulness would be better suited for more tasks, or as a subject of experimentation. In any case, it was important that the wood be transported immediately. While he was in town, Magarius wanted to visit a few of the shops for some odds and ends that he needed to continue his experiments. The local glass blower, for instance, always had jars and other containers that were some of the most beautifully crafted the Lich had seen in decades. Given how long the most recent bodies had lasted after transitioning, Magarius knew that if he didn't take advantage of his form at the moment, he wouldn't be able to later on. He so enjoyed browsing artisan wares. As the three men made their way toward the boat docks, a sensation began to vibrate within the chest of the walking corpse. Next to them was yet another inn and tavern, something Wellshire wasn't short of having. The phylactery he embedded within began to feel as though it was slightly humming. It was a feeling he hadn't felt in a very long time, and only meant one thing.
"It's here,"
he said in a hushed tone to his traveling companion. Myron had been oblivious to his employer stopping in his tracks and continued his walk towards the docks.
"Are you sure this time?"
Darius replied, watching as Myron walked out of earshot. "Yes, I am sure of it." Darius scanned the immediate area. There were several guardsmen walking in the direction of the port, An elderly man smoking a pipe sitting on a bench outside of a chemist shop on the other side of the road, and many people walking about. If the artifact was there, it would be next to impossible to find it.
Can you tell where it is?
Darius asked, looking back at Myron, who was now a fair distance away.
No, only that it's here,
Magarius replied, putting a hand on his chest. The vibrations from the crystal were the strongest he's felt since the night at Galen's house. Walking around in a small circle, the lich felt the crystal vibrate strongest the closer he came to the chemist shop. He stopped his circling and fixated on the building.
The chemist shop?
Darius asked, still watching Myron disappear into the crowd near the docks.
At least in that direction. What now?
I don't know. With the artifact, I wouldn't need the witchwood, Magarius replied. The tone in his voice shifted to one of excitement. After many, many years, the egg-shaped stone was within his grasp. As his master contemplated their next move, Darius caught a smell in the air that was familiar. For once, it wasn't food. Glancing around the people, his gaze fixated on a pair of travelers walking along the other side of the road. It was the man who gave him the scar and the little girl. The burly figure of a man slowly made his way behind a pillar that was used to hold up a second-level patio from the nearby tavern. Magarius watched the peculiar behavior of his traveling companion.
That's him,
Darius grumbled, trying to look inconspicuous. The one that gave you the scar? Magarius asked, looking back at the leather-clad man walking with the girl. He could see how the man would be intimidating to some. There was an air of confidence and power about him, not to mention the finely crafted silver axes tucked within his belt.
I want him,
Darius said as the anger began to swell within him. Yes, I suppose you do. But if you did that, we would have so much to worry about than one man and a little girl. Patience, my friend. Magarius knew it had to be much more than coincidence. There was more going on than just a happenstance of coming across the man his compatriot entangled with at the village. The village where he was told to look for the artifact by a seer. Perhaps it wasn't the artifact the witch saw, but the man who would lead Magarius to the stone. The lich watched as the two newcomers nodded a greeting to the elderly man with the pipe. There was a brief conversation before the two made their way into the chemist's shop. Indeed, much more than coincidence.